om mulighetene der? Veldig små. Nei. Nei vel.
The next game is against Brazil, and Norway have never lost to Brazil. And one historic win was in 1998, a World Cup group stage. Do you think Norway is capable of making it happen again, or maybe Brazil will want a revenge?
I mean, we are here for a reason, because we won and we are good. So everything can happen. It's one game, so for sure it will be a good game, and may the best win. Yeah.
This was a very difficult match against Cote d'Ivoire, and the mistakes made against Cote d'Ivoire cannot be made against Brazil. What do you think you guys need to fix before guys against Brazil in order to be a successful match against the 5-time world champion?
Now we will, to be honest, I will just try to enjoy now the game, and then for sure we'll do analysis the next days. But now it's important to enjoy this moment, and then we will for sure look what we need to do next game.
Nobody expected Norway's World Cup story to turn into this kind of pressure cooker moment. But that's exactly what happened in Dallas. The heat was brutal, the stakes were huge, and every second felt loaded. Norway had spent decades chasing a night like this, and now it was right there in front of them, hanging by a thread. One mistake could ruin everything. One touch could change history. Then, in the 86th minute, Haaland stepped up and buried it with his left foot.
Det lå I lufta.
Men Erling Braut Haaland.
Vi får han servert.
Delivering the goal that finally pushed Norway through against Ivory Coast. Back in Oslo, the emotions were just as intense.
But I'm telling you right now, if this man has a big World Cup, boom, right to the top. Even over this guy, I love you, Z, but I will take Haaland over you if he has a big World Cup in terms of legendary status.
That's a big statement.
Fans had been gathering since early morning, doing whatever they could to survive the wait. Some painted flags across their faces, some sat crocheting or playing cards, and others stood in Viking helmets under 30-degree heat.
If you said to yourself before season started, I get to 20 goals, that was the barometer to get to, wasn't it? 20 goals. Do you have is there anything mentality-wise?
40.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Yeah, is there anything mentality-wise that you think I need to get to a number?
What would be a good season for me? What would you think you'd say? 20. If I got 20, you'd say it's an okay season.
No,
you said a good season. I didn't say a great season.
Refusing to miss a second of it. When Haaland scored, the release was unreal. After 88 years of waiting, heartbreak, and near misses, Norway finally had a moment its supporters had dreamed about for generations.
What have we found here in the crowd? This man looks more like Erling Haaland than Erling Haaland does. It's his grandfather. He's got the look, the build, everything. What a find. The apple didn't fall far, folks.
Norway came into this match with real momentum behind them. Only a few days earlier, they had stunned Senegal 3-2 in the group stage, and that result changed the mood around the team fast. This was no longer a squad just happy to be at the tournament. They looked dangerous, confident, and fully convinced they could hurt anyone in front of them. Haaland was delivering when it mattered, belief was spreading through the squad, and suddenly Norway were carrying themselves like a team that expected to go deep.
There's a lot of things I can become better at. Everything, by the way. People say I'm good at scoring goals, but I missed the biggest chance in the world ever 2 days ago, so I can also become better at that.
Then came France, and that's when Norway made the call that got everybody talking. Instead of going all out against the defending world champions, they rotated key players, left starters on the bench, and protected the core of the side.
Statistically, no, I'm not. I will say I'm up there. I don't think I scored the most goals this season, so statistically, no, I'm not. Because I think Harry Kane and Mbappe scored more goals than me, and that's a reality, so no, I'm not.
It was a cold-blooded decision. A final group stage game against France should have been the perfect chance to make a statement, but Norway treated it like a long game instead. The reaction was instant. Some people called it smart management. Others thought they were messing with the team's rhythm at the worst possible time. Those doubts only got louder once the knockout stage began. Ivory Coast came out aggressive and made Norway uncomfortable from the opening whistle.
It's come to my attention that one of the most anticipated matches of the World Cup so far, Brazil versus Norway, has even more at stake than I initially thought. So I was told that apparently Erling Haaland has a pretty big rivalry with this guy, Gabriel. And initially I was like, there's no way it's that bad. Like, yeah, people have rivalries. No, this is bad.
They controlled the first 15 minutes, refused to let Norway settle, and kept the pressure high. When Diallo fired in the equalizer in the 74th minute, the whole game shifted. You could feel the nerves creeping in again. Suddenly, the weight of 88 years was sitting on Norway's shoulders all over again. But this time, when the match got messy and the pressure started closing in, Norway didn't fold. They stayed alive, stayed calm, and waited for the one moment that changed everything. Norway kept coming right to the very end. The press stayed aggressive, the movement never stopped, and even with the clock running down, they still looked ready to throw everything into one last attack. Then, in the 86th minute, it finally clicked. Patrick Berg spotted Sanderberg breaking down the right, and with one final surge of energy, Berg whipped in the cross Norway had been begging for. That moment said a lot. The rotation against France had not been some wild gamble after all. The fresh legs mattered. The energy was still there when it counted most. And once Norway found a way past Ivory Coast, the next name waiting for them was enough to change the whole temperature around this tournament, Brazil. Just hearing that name shifts everything.
I think that we probably won't start the game, so we will be ready for him if he comes on. We know him, and it's impossible to tell the players all his tricks. I think you always find a new trick in the book, but and he's a danger man, and I think also the other Brazilian players looks up to him. You can see that the game he got on the pitch, that he bonded at once with the other offensive players.
Brazil are the team most countries pray they do not have to face, a 5-time world champion with a history that can rattle opponents before kickoff even starts. Norway had beaten them once before, in Marseille in 1998, when Kjetil Rekdal's penalty delivered one of the biggest nights Norwegian football had ever seen. But that win came in the group stage, not in a knockout fight with everything on the line. It did not carry Norway into the next round either. Italy shut that dream down only days later. So this time, if Norway wanted a quarterfinal place, there was no room to get distracted by old memories or big names. Brazil could wait, Ivory Coast still had to be finished off first. And for long stretches of this match, Norway did not look like a team ready to handle that job. The opening 39 minutes were rough. They looked shaky, pinned back, and far too easy to rattle. Ivory Coast was sharper, quicker into the duels, and looked far more comfortable with the pace of the game. Norway had moments, but there was no control, no real calm, and not much to suggest they were about to grab the match by the throat. While all of that tension was building in Dallas, the scene back in Oslo had already turned into an all-day event. Hours before kickoff, supporters were pouring into Spiker Supper in Norway, shirts, Viking outfits, and flags wrapped around their shoulders.
So it's going to be Norway versus Brazil. That ain't gonna lie. That's gonna be a great game.
Some brought cards to kill time, while others showed up with paint, crochet, and knitting, turning the long wait into something that felt half football watch party, half national gathering. As the afternoon dragged on, the crowds in Oslo only got bigger. The line kept stretching down Karl Johans Gate, turning into a long river of red, white, and blue, as more supporters poured in. Over at Sukkerbitten, the bar manager was already talking about selling around 3,000 half-litres before the night was over, which told you everything about the mood in the city. Oslo was starting to feel like it does on the 17th of May, only this wasn't built on pure celebration. There was tension underneath it. The nerves were sharper, the waiting felt heavier, and the sense that something huge might happen was hanging over everything. By the time the public viewing area opened at 3, the city was already fully switched on. The tables filled up almost instantly. Long before kickoff, Norway was already treating a random Tuesday like a national event. There was that weird mix in the air that only football can create, where people are laughing, drinking, and trying to enjoy themselves, but every conversation still circles back to the same nervous thought. Something big felt close, and everybody knew it. Oslo was in full party mode, but underneath the noise there was real tension, because one bad result would kill the whole atmosphere in seconds. And while the city was gearing up for a massive night, Ivory Coast landed in Dallas looking like the kind of team built to ruin the whole script. They came in like a brick wall. Across 270 minutes of group stage football, they had only conceded 2 goals, and nothing about them suggested they were planning to open up now. Sebastian Haller led the attack, and behind him sat a midfield designed for one thing: absorb pressure, stay compact, and punish teams the second they got sloppy. This was a side built for ugly games, the kind where every attack feels like hard work and every mistake gets punished. They had never played a World Cup knockout match before, with 3 straight group stage exits between 2010 and 2018 keeping them away from this stage, but they did not arrive looking grateful just to be there.
I was in Italy and I see Erling Haaland and I freak the out.
They looked like a team ready to drag Norway into a fight and make the whole night uncomfortable. On paper, Norway had every reason to believe they could take control. They had been one of the most dangerous attacking teams in the tournament, scoring 8 goals in the group stage and creating 14 big chances, more than any other side at the World Cup. Erling Haaland had scored in all 3 group matches, and Martin Odegaard was dictating games whenever Norway had the ball. Everything about the numbers pointed toward a team ready to grab this match and force it in their own direction. But in those opening 15 minutes in Dallas, none of Norway's usual threat was there. All the numbers, all the confidence, all the talk about their attack meant nothing once the game actually kicked off. Ivory Coast took control straight away and made Norway look uncomfortable from the first whistle. Their wingers drove Norway's fullbacks backward, the midfield could not keep hold of the ball, and almost every loose clearance seemed to drop perfectly for an Ivorian shirt. It was one of those starts where you could feel the pattern forming almost instantly, and it was not the pattern Norway wanted. Ivory Coast was setting the tempo, winning the second balls, and forcing Norway into a match they did not look ready to handle. Back in Oslo, people could feel it getting ugly. The nerves were no longer sitting quietly in the background. They had taken over the whole mood. Fans sat frozen in their seats with hands over their faces, barely reacting, barely speaking, just staring at the screen and hoping the storm would pass. At Ullevål Stadion, where thousands had packed in front of the giant screen, the silence turned heavy in a hurry. It was the kind of silence that only happens when an entire country is watching the same game and quietly fearing the exact same collapse. Every bad touch, every lost duel, every dangerous Ivory Coast attack just tightened the feeling even more. Then, in the 39th minute, the whole match flipped on one moment. Antonio Nusa picked up the ball on the left side of the box after spending most of the half barely involved, almost drifting through a game that looked like it was slipping away from Norway. But the second the space opened, he showed exactly why he can change a match in a heartbeat. He cut inside, steadied himself, and bent a shot into the far corner with zero hesitation. It came completely against the flow of the game, against the pressure Ivory Coast had built, and against everything the first 39 minutes had been telling us. Norway had looked rattled, second best, and stuck. Then Nusa produced one clean, ruthless moment and changed the whole picture. At Ullevål, the reaction was immediate. Thousands jumped up at once, scarves flew into the air, and the noise that had been trapped under all that tension finally exploded out. Oslo had spent hours drowning in nerves, and now all of that anxiety suddenly turned into something far more dangerous for the rest of the tournament: belief. Norway even had chances to make the lead bigger before half-time. Haaland got one look at goal, Sorloth got another, neither could put it away. So the 1-0 lead made it to the break, but nobody watching it believed the game was under control. Not even close. That's the cruelty of knockout football. One goal is never enough, especially when you're carrying the history Norway were carrying into this match. This was a country trying to get through a World Cup knockout game for the first time, so even with the lead, nobody was relaxing. And when the second half kicked off, it felt like the break had changed absolutely nothing. Ivory Coast came straight back with the ball, pushed Norway deep into their own half again, and started squeezing the game tighter and tighter. The pressure never eased. Norway was stuck defending waves of attacks, barely able to keep possession long enough to calm things down. Ivory Coast kept racking up chances, finishing with 9 shots and 3 on target during that stretch, and every minute had the same uncomfortable feeling hanging over it. Another opening looked like it was only seconds away. Then came the chance that could have changed the entire night. In the 56th minute, Norway won a corner, and for a second it looked like the perfect escape route. Torbjørn Heggem rose above everyone in the box and smashed a header toward the far post, with supporters in Oslo already half out of their seats and Ivory Coast suddenly looking vulnerable for one of the first times in the half. It had the look of a goal. It had the feeling of the moment Norway had been waiting for. But football can be cruel in the smallest possible ways. Amad Diallo, brought on in the second half, produced the first huge intervention of the game by clearing the ball off the line. It was the kind of moment measured in inches away from 2-0. inches away from giving Norway breathing room, inches away from turning a nervous lead into something they could actually hold on to. Instead, that chance vanished, and 18 minutes later, Diallo was down the other end doing the damage himself. He, combined with Nicolas Pepe, kept his run going, took the return pass, and then buried a left-footed shot into the net. Just like that, all the tension Norway had been trying to outrun came crashing back. It was 1-1, and the entire mood of the match changed in a second. At Ullevål, the crowd tried to fight against it. You could hear people attempting to drag the atmosphere back up, almost forcing cheers into the air, but it never fully caught. The sound dropped into something much darker. Dread took over. You could feel the shift instantly, because this was the exact kind of moment Norway knew too well. This was when the old scars start creeping back into the game, when every supporter begins thinking about all the times hope has slipped away before. The pressure was no longer some distant part of history. It was right there on the pitch, sitting on the players' shoulders and making every touch feel heavier. For a country that had never made it beyond this stage, the fear was brutally clear. This was the point where teams either crack under the weight of it or dig out something deeper. In the 86th minute, Norway found that something. Patrick Berg picked up the ball in midfield and moved it quickly to Sander Berg on the right. Berg lifted his head and drove across through the thick Dallas air with real intent, the kind of ball that demands somebody attacks it. And waiting at the far post was the one man every Norwegian fan wanted in that moment, Erling Haaland, the scorer in every group game, the face of the team, the player carrying the hopes of an entire football nation on his shoulders. He met the cross with his left foot and turned it in, delivering the goal Norway had been desperate for. That was the moment everything burst open. In Dallas, the Norwegian bench spilled onto the pitch in pure chaos, as months of pressure, planning and belief all came crashing out at once. Martin Odegaard dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by what had just happened. On the broadcast, cameras caught Erling Haaland in tears, as the stadium shook around him, the noise rolling through the stands while Norway's players tried to process the fact that they were seconds away from something their country had never done before. After all the tension, all the fear, and all the talk about whether they could handle a knockout match, Haaland's finish had ripped the whole game open. Back in Oslo, the reaction was even wilder. The city completely lost itself. At Spiker Supper, people were screaming, grabbing strangers, singing at the top of their lungs, and sending drinks flying in every direction without caring where any of them landed. The nerves that had been building all day were gone in an instant, replaced by total chaos and disbelief. At Sukkerbeiden, all the talk about selling 3,000 half-liters suddenly felt irrelevant. Nobody cared about numbers anymore. The only thing that mattered was that Norway had one foot planted in history and the whole country could feel it happening in real time. Down Karl Johan's gate, the supporters who had been standing around since morning finally got the payoff they had spent the whole day chasing. These were the fans who had lined up for hours, painted flags on their faces, sat crocheting, played cards to kill time, and turned an ordinary Tuesday into something that felt closer to a national event. They had come hoping to witness a piece of football history, and in the end, that's exactly what they got. When the final whistle arrived, it only confirmed what Haaland's finish in the 86th minute had already set in motion. Norway 2, Ivory Coast 1. No twist at the end, no collapse, just history. It was Norway's first ever World Cup knockout win, a result that instantly carved out a permanent place in the country's football story. After the match, Martin Odegaard called it the pinnacle of his career, and that says everything about the size of the moment. This is a player who has captained Arsenal in the Premier League, carried Norway through qualifiers, and dealt with years of frustration when the national team kept falling short on the big stage. And still, this one night stood above all of it. That's what happens when a country drags 88 years of frustration into a match and finally gets to leave it behind. Now comes Brazil. Norway's reward for surviving all of this is a round of 16 showdown with the most intimidating name in international football, a 5-time world champion, and a team that still lives in Norwegian memory for one unforgettable reason. Back in 1998, Norway beat Brazil 2-1 in Marseille, with Kjetil Rekdal's late penalty and Egil Olsen's game plan producing one of the biggest shocks the country has ever seen. That result still hangs over Norwegian football because of who Brazil were, what that win looked like at the time, and how deeply it lodged itself in the country's memory. But there's one big difference between this Brazil meeting and the famous one from 1998. That win came in the group stage. It gave Norway a night to remember, but it did not carry them into the quarterfinals. Italy slammed that door shut 4 days later. This time, the challenge is heavier, the pressure is bigger, and the consequences are far more serious. On paper, this is the point where Norway's run is supposed to end. Brazil are the giant waiting on the other side, the team with the medals, the history, and the reputation to make most countries nervous before kickoff even arrives. But this tournament has already made a fool out of the safe predictions more than one. It was wrong in the 39th minute against Ivory Coast when Antonio Nusa curled in a finish that the game had not really been building toward. It was wrong again in the 86th minute, when Erling Haaland appeared at the far post at the exact moment his country needed someone to save the night. That's the thing Norway have discovered in this tournament. Football does not always care what the script says. It does not care about the neat ending people expect, and it definitely does not care about who is supposed to win on paper. History has shown Norway that before. It happened in Marseille in 1998, when Kjetil Rekdal buried that penalty against the most feared team in the world and gave Norwegian football one of its most unforgettable nights. It happened again on that long Tuesday in Oslo, when thousands of supporters decided the hours of waiting, the nerves, the painted flags, and the endless time in line would all be worth it before the match had even started. That belief looked risky for a while, but in the end, it paid off. Norway are not the country carrying that knockout curse anymore. That version of the story is done. Now they are the team that finally got through. The team that dragged 88 years of pressure into a World Cup knockout match and came out the other side. And now Brazil, with all its trophies, history and fear factor, has to deal with a Norwegian side full of belief, momentum, and the backing of an entire country. If you want more football stories like this, more match breakdowns, and more big moments from across the tournament, like, share, and subscribe to Matchio so you don't miss what's coming next. Peace.